Hey, welcome back to another Wednesday tutorial. Today I'm going to be talking about using Stripe Connect with PHP to create your own marketplace. I also have this. It's on my screen right now. It's not posted yet, but today is Monday for me, and I'm going to be posting this today. It is a post explaining all the code I'm writing. I'll also include that in the description below. I recommend opening it and following it as well. I apologize in advance for any typos or spelling mistakes. I'm just doing this so that people who don't like watching videos can just read instead. And there's a spot explaining all the code because there's a lot of files going on. So a couple things that you'll need is you're going to need to have MAMP. If you look at my computer again, this is MAMP. It's running currently for me. I'm on a Mac. If you're on Windows, you can use WAMP, or Linux, you use LAMP. And then what you also need to do is have I have it open right now, but you'll need to have be in your htdocs folder in MAMP, and you need to have Composer installed. So I'm just actually go back a folder. So in my htdocs, which is where all your files sit for MAMP, I can also go to Computer, Applications, and then MAMP is right here. And then htdocs, your logs are here, by the way, but that's important a bit. So here I'm going to create a new folder called Stripe Connect 2. I've already done this to write the tutorial in order to write it properly without that many errors. I actually went through and did all this, so I'm going to do it a second time. So I'm into my Stripe Connect 2 folder, and based on this tutorial, it tells you have to install the PHP Stripe libraries. So you just run this, and that will install it. Open up, this is all the code that we're going to be writing. I'm going to open up the folder again. I want Stripe Connect 2. And what I'm telling you with this is, so you should have a Composer JSON file, a Composer locked in a vendor file. And what I'm saying here now is, the assumptions I'm going with, I'm not going to use an account or a database or anything like that. I'm assuming that you have those all set up. You don't absolutely need them. You can just follow the tutorial as is, but the idea being, like, you have to have a user login. So the idea is you would have a user login. You check to see if they have a Stripe account ID. If they don't, then you set that up. But you have to know which user is which. So first, we're going to talk about actually what Stripe Connect is. It's a marketplace. So the idea is, when I first heard of it when I wanted to create exactly a marketplace, but I wanted to create events. I wanted to be for people to be able to set up their banking information. So like a user logs into my platform, they're able to create a form for their event. They create the form, people go to their form, like their customers, they pay, and then the money, I just take an application fee for using my service. And so when I was looking, I couldn't find anything. I originally was going to actually do the transfers myself, which has been crazy. Then I found Stripe Connect from the guys from Stripe. It was back when it was like in early beta. I really appreciate the Stripe team for actually telling me about it. It was awesome. They had incredible support. And so, essentially that's it. And so now it's the idea that you handle this. It's like having a Stripe account. Okay? If that makes sense. It's like you're managing their Stripe account via an API. Now you can do it so you can do an OAuth, but this is a fully custom Stripe account. It used to be called managed accounts, now it's called custom accounts. So the first thing you have to do is we're going to create two files. File number one is called setup. I gotta stop going to different windows. So we're going to create something called setup.php. And that's going to be like I guess it'd be like the equivalent to like your user account settings, I guess. This is where you'd set up all the banking information. And so what we're first going to do is, I have a bunch of notes in the code here, but I'm going to copy. I gotta stop doing that. Paste this in. So if you quickly look, first thing I do is do a require, and then it's supposed to be like this, but since this is not my root, it would be like this if I actually went and did it properly. But by just using, I say, in the current directory, then there's a vendor folder here with the auto.php. So that's why I have it like that. I have a bunch of comments here. One comment is here, so this is just my default settings. Right here is you grab your user from your sessions, from your login. And so you have to do that, and then once you have your user, you want to check the database to see if they have a Stripe account ID. The reason why you do that is because if they do have a Stripe account ID, you have to see what fields are missing. If they don't, you have to begin the setup process. So this is the first part. I've included here, it's the setup process. So if you do begin account setup, so if you save this, and then you render, I want this file here. As you can see, I can now begin the setup process. And the next thing you want to do is go in and actually add the server-side code to begin the setup process. So here it is. Again, I'm assuming you have an account set up. Here's the code here. You really have to stop doing that. You go to Setup Actions and you put it in here. And so as you can see, I'm referencing the current user's email. It's hard-coded for me, but this is where you get it from your database when you get the Stripe ID as well, and you get the current user from your sessions. I really can't be more clear about that. If you get these things coming in null, and you're asking me why, that's the reason why. And so what we're doing is we're essentially importing our Stripe library, we're grabbing our user, we're grabbing their account ID, we're grabbing the action type. I'm going to explain that in a second. We're assigning our API key, and then we're seeing that the action type is begin, and then we're creating a new account object. So as I talk, everything I'm referencing to is in the Stripe docs. I also included a link right here. And what we're doing is creating an account object. That's what it is. It's for the Stripe account. And so here it is. Here's an example of it. This is the full documentation. And this is what we're doing. We're just going to slowly fill out this information for the account object, and that's how we know what information this user has. Therefore, all you have to do is just save the account object. Couldn't be more clear. Don't save any of your user's information. Let Stripe do it. They do it securely. So just the account ID. But getting back to this, you grab this. So I'm going to jump back over to setup. I know this is getting a little confusing, but what we have here is a form that does a post request and goes to setup action. It has a hidden input text with a value saying begin setup. This is the action type. This is kind of like what I'm trying to do here is make it so that it's dynamic and we don't specifically have to have a new PHP script for every single potential needed field, because as you can see, these are all the potential needed fields, and you don't want to do that. That'd be a lot of scripts, and so you don't want to do that. And there's too many edge cases and stuff, especially when you start adding other countries. So it's gonna be done in as dynamic way as possible. There's gonna be a lot of special cases, but as dynamic as possible. And so now we submit this form. It knows it's doing a begin setup. It creates a custom account versus a standard account. Standard accounts when you OAuth with Stripe. We want to manage all via API. Our country is going to be the U.S. I'm going to use that as a standard because you can also do with Canada. It's very similar. The one thing I mentioned down here in the comments is you have to be very careful because essentially the way it works is it has fields. That means it has it says you need specific fields. Maybe the field needed is a tax ID. In Canada we call that a SIN number, but if I said tax ID to a Canadian, can I have your tax ID? Everyone would sit there and go, I don't know what tax ID is. And your user drop-off rate may be incredibly high. So I actually recommend, to do some specific printing for the labels and stuff and explain it based on each country. So as you implement for more and more countries, I recommend only doing it for, I recommend actually going one at a time and verifying, explaining what each element is. And so we have that. And I just uncommented this because I'm going to show you what the response is. I'm going to hit begin setup. And sorry, I should also mention that I've got my keys from right here. They're going to be gone by the time this video comes out, but the keys are coming from right here, and it's on my dashboard. Just go to dashboard.stripe.com, and then you'll see in the bottom left corner I'm on testing, and then under API you'll see the keys. And so this is my response. It's what PHP has as a response, and as you can see, you have an ID element and it has an account ID here. This is their Stripe account ID. You have to save this one piece of information. So what we're going to do is, I'm not actually going to, what you do here is you reference it like this, and then what you'd save this in a database. Again, save it in a database associated with the current user, and then that's what you're going to reference from now on. Since I don't have a database set up, I'm actually going to hard code that right into here, the same way I've hard coded a user email in there. And I also have to do that on this page as well, because again, you retrieve the Stripe account ID based on the user. And so now when I reload setup.php, nothing loads. Okay, so nothing loads on purpose, because if you remember, the else in this case is here because we have a Stripe account ID. So the next thing we have to do is grab the required fields. And if you reference this, you'll see that the very bottom, don't scroll past it, there's a verification element under legal entity, and then they have fields needed. This will tell you exactly what pieces of information you need from the user, and if this is empty, you're good. The user's all set up, they can start accepting charges. As you scroll down, we're going to take all this code here. I didn't actually, I gotta stop doing that. We're going to take it, and it's all going in here. And so what we do is we reference our Stripe set API key, we grab the account based on the Stripe account ID, and we now have that big object from the documentation, this big object we have, but ours is missing a lot of information, and we have to get the user to fill out that information. And then we create another form, and this time we say that the needed, we grab the, sorry, yeah, I should mention this. If fields needed is 0, like the size of the array is 0, then you're all set up. You have nothing you need from the user. But if not, you want to grab the very first element, so fields needed at element 0, and then you grab the needed code. And then you put it into the hidden, so that's how we know what kind of action we're performing. Needed code is going to be my label. It's going to look terrible. I 100% recommend customizing this. I'm not going to do it for simplicity. And then essentially all I do is have a value. And if I refresh my setup, I save this page. Vendor auto. Okay, so the page isn't loading, meaning that there's a 500 error being thrown. The way you solve 500 errors, in at least the easiest way, is just look at the error logs. So right now it threw it. If I scroll down, provided, so it's telling me that it tells me that my API keys are mixed up, which they are. And so then if I reload this, I should get something. Okay. So I'm also just going to clear the log, so the next time I throw an error, I know which error it's specifically thrown. And so the first thing first field they need is date of birth here, and they need the day. But this is actually we're going to do two things. So as you can see, it's this dot notation. So it's like legal entity is an object in the account object, and then in that there's a date of birth object, and then in that there's a field called day. So we're going to write two functions that's going to take that, and it's going to recursively go down and assign it and then save it. And what I mean by that, actually, sorry, first thing we have to do is retrieve the account on the server side. So go to server-side actions. Instead of invalid action, we just say else. Grab it, grab the value, and look up the value. Verify that the value is in the fields needed, like the action type. Because remember, just passing the action, the needed field into here, into the action type. Therefore, it should still be in on the other side. And we do this because you can change the HTML code on the front end. And what we say is, at the action type. So hypothetically, if it was just legal entity and that was just like let's say this was just like first name, all we have to do is say first name at first name, set the value, and then save it. Relatively simple. I'm taking this all from the documentation on the update and account. So as you can see, here's a perfect example. You grab it by the account ID, account at support phone, put in support phone, and then assign save the account. Save the account. That's what we're doing, the same thing. So if support phone came in as the action ID, we say okay, at support phone, put the value in there, and then save it. Relatively simple, except for the fact that we have this nested object, this nested legal entity dot date of birth dot date. So I wrote these two functions here. What these two functions do is essentially say they iterate through, and so I'll explain it. So you pass the Stripe object in. It says break this dot notation into an array, like a list of them. So at this point I would have legal entity as my first element in the list, then I would have date of birth and then day. But then I pass it in here to update child. The list is 3, not 1, so it skips this. It grabs the child, so it says Stripe object at legal entity. So if you look at the documentation, that one. So here's legal entity, so it says, okay, grab legal entity, and it returns this object. And then it says, okay, take off the first element, which is legal entity, and now look at, what I want to do is look at the child, the first element again. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to explain it. You want to look at the child element of legal entity, but like the next item. So the next item is date of birth. So what I'm passing in is just the object for legal entity, and the keys remaining is date of birth and day. And so I pass that in, and I do the same thing. I say it's size 2, not 1, and therefore I grab the element date of birth, and then go back and take off date of birth, so it's just key. And then now it's just 1, so I know if I go date of birth dot date, assign the value, return that element, and it saves it all. I don't know. I don't want to explain all of my recursive thinking. It's hard to explain recursive thinking, but just run through an example with that. And so that's how it's going to update the dot notation dynamically. So it doesn't. We're not going to have to create each individual like legal entity dot this and then like change it every single time. We'll just have a couple special cases. And so if I ran this, sorry, I need the server side code too. So I go back up to setup action, and I go here and I say, okay, instead of just this, it's going to be this code. So it's going to say, if there's dots in it, like go save it by recursively going through it. Otherwise, just save the one in the root element. And as you can tell by my docs there, I'm going to hit update. It's going to throw a 500 error. I'm going to take a look here. It says, okay, missing required param. It says date of birth. And then it says month. I'll just get rid of that and clear it. And what that means is the date of birth object, it needs all 3 elements. And it can't actually do that nesting. So we're it can't just update the day. It has to update the day, the month, and the year. And it needs a full date of birth. So this is actually going to be even more of a special case. But don't worry, in the docs there's code for that. And we want all the second half of this. And so we're going to paste that right in front of here, hit space. So what it does is here, it says, if it's like the legal entity is anything to do with the date of birth, it's going to split it, and then it's going to verify that it has this format, and then it's going to save it all in a very, like, and this is why we did the dot notation, to avoid this, but sometimes you'll have to actually do this, like these special cases. So with that, we're making the assumption that they provide us with the proper notation. So say this is my birthday. I make sure I've saved this. I have. If I hit update, it says done, meaning it's properly saved the user's birthday. You can verify this by going to connected accounts, and as you can see, I have my user's account here, and I can see that I just entered this birthday and it's right there. And so now it works, and if I go back to setup, I have another legal entity that I need to get. And the reason why I showed you those two functions that I wrote, and I explained that, and I just didn't do it the first, like the way, I didn't just do it this way, was because first name is giving me the easiest example to do it. So watch. It's a nested loop, but I can just do this, and it knows it does it. So in this case, it goes down this path and does that recursive. And if I go back to setup, I got my last name, I hit update, and I mean you can set it up so that it redirects back, and then okay, so type. So type, there's two types. It's individual or account, and you can figure this out by looking at the documentation or throwing an error. It will tell you if you don't have one of the two types they allow. It'll tell you that you don't have one of the two types. So for this, we'll have to limit the number of we'll have to limit the choices they have. So we're going to use a select for that on the HTML side. So what we're going to do now is customize the form a little bit. So in setup.php, instead of just having this, it's going to be an if statement. So it says, if it's type, only load the options, which is individual or company. Otherwise, load just the text box. And that's fine, because we don't actually have to change the other parts of the code. So I'm going to say, okay, individual, hit update. It says done. Sweet. Okay, and so as based on the document, based on this posting, you'll see that we hit another error. This is another special case. Address, you need to enter the entire address. So this is city, country, line 1, line 2, all that. And so with this, we have to create another special case on our front end. So in setup.php, hit down. In this, hopefully these are all lined up. In this if statement, so if needed code, if it's this, then, and so I'm only assigning, so I'm going to do this. So as you can see, it's like now like the entire address, and it won't work on the server side because we haven't changed it. I can tell you based on my post that Canada won't work. It has to be the same for the testing as the account, so I'm just going to remove Canada and limit to just the US. You only can be a US citizen to set up an account. So what I'll do is say, all you have to do is literally copy all this code into setup action. So it's saying if it's one of these types, or it's one of these types, and I just want to say if it's, little space there. I know this the inline is all messed up, so what I do in here is I say, okay, so if it's the action type is address, excuse me, grab the specific text boxes because we have a special thing, check to verify that like none of the required ones are all empty, so line 2 is not required, but they do, I don't see why we need this, they do require that you don't save line 2, like if line 2 is blank, like is the empty string, don't save it, so that's why I have this little if statement, and then I assign it all, and I hit done. So that's just like a special, this one's another special case, so special case number 1, special case number 2, everything else should fall into one of these two, so hit save, head back over. This is just me explaining that I get an error with the address for the business does not match the account country. So I'm going to go with 123 Fig Street and hit update. Okay, so value cannot be blank. Value cannot be blank. The reason why I'm getting that error is because I'm not getting into the proper... I didn't put this code in the right spot. Okay, that's exactly why. So the value check gets put here, so I have to put actually into this else statement. Else, and then here. So if it's set up, and then if action type is one of these, then it will work. Try that again. Update. And it says done, therefore we now have we can verify that on this, and now I should have an address. It says not provided, but as you can see it works. And so it says legal entity S4 number, whatever that is, last 4 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4. All these things are handled because of that recursive call. Set up, personal number. This has to be 9 characters. These are all the small checks you have to do. I read through the documentation. You have to do all these checks. Or if you just handle the error that Stripe throws, like if you do a try catch, it will throw the error and it will tell you exactly what's wrong, and you just have to return that to user. So if you do that like with an AJAX call, it's one easy way to handle it. And so here it is, legal entity.verification.document. This is the next special case. They're looking for a government issued, a photo of a government issued ID or a scan of one, and so you need to upload a file. So what we're going to do is copy and paste this. This is going to be on the front end, and this is a form. But it's for, like, this form has file upload in it. So as you can see, it says check to see it's a verification document, and then it has a multi-part form data so it can handle the file. And then as you can see, the input type is file, and that's what we're going to grab. So save that. So if we refresh the page, there should be now a file button, so you can upload a file. So now what I'm going to do is I'm following the file upload given by the Stripe documentation. I'm also following the W3 schools for this. This is for the form, and then I have a GIST here that is S3 upload. I'm not doing the S3 part, I'm just doing the file upload. And so the file upload guide based on Stripe, they tell you that you have to upload to their S3 bucket. And so that's what this code is here. So I literally have to just copy and paste this in. This is why I wrote the documentation, because I went through all of this pain with doing it myself, and so I don't have a value, so I have to put it outside that if statement, but I want to put it inside this one. Hit back to kind of line these up. Oh, that would be bad. And so let me explain what's going on here. So I'm uploading a file to this name, right? I'm grabbing the file. This points to the temporary path it creates. I'm opening the temporary path. If you hit an error here, it's a permissions error. I can tell you right now, that's what it is. Options, do permissions properly, don't just give them all permissions. Or upload to an S3 bucket. I have a bunch of videos on that too, so check those out. But and then I upload using the Stripe to their S3 bucket, and the purpose is an identity document. They only accept 2, and then you upload the file, and then you retrieve the account and you save the file response ID. They just want the ID. They don't you don't have to save any objects or anything. They always just want IDs. And so with that, this should work. And the one thing is since we're in testing, they don't actually need a proper document. So just put a file, any image in there, and hit upload, and it updated. So now they have that. And so what we see on the screen now is terms of service, and they're looking for a date, and there's no actual user action that needs to be performed with this. So what I suggest doing is actually doing this at the start before you begin setup. So the idea is you to increase to lower the drop off rate, but by clicking begin, you agree to our terms and services and the Stripe ones as they document in as required. So if you go check out this link, I don't know if okay. It says like register account by, this is the exact thing I recommend, and you have to include this if you're using Stripe account. As a result, we're going to do that. So we're going to update our initial setup.php. Right, this is the original form that's being loaded, and instead we're going to change it to say this. So we're going to include it saying by registering you're accepting your terms and services. And then in the setup action, we're going to change this to be, I'm just going to delete all this. We're going to change this to be like create the account, get the ID back, retrieve the ID, accept the terms and services, and save it. So as you can see, I'm going to copy and paste that in. So I grab the Stripe account ID from the result, I retrieve it, and then I save it. And that makes me agree to the terms and services. One thing I'm going to personally do is echo this Stripe ID. And the reason why I'm doing that is so that I can use it later. So I'm not saving to a database. So what the one thing is now, this user, this current Stripe account ID will never be able to accept terms and services, because there's only one way to do that, and that's by creating an account for the very first time. So you actually have to erase it. So if you have a database, clear this account ID. It's useless now. It's just, you're in just testing, so it doesn't matter. Just get rid of it. And so if I reopen this, it'll give me this big look thing, and I'm actually restarting this whole process. So I'm just going to do this quickly. It will respond with a Stripe ID. And based on this, it's actually accepted terms and services. I'm just going to paste this back in here. So I have a Stripe ID. And then if I go back to setup, 1993. Let me go back to setup. That's for my name. I could just butcher my own spelling. Account type individual. One, 2, 3 Fake Street. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Hit update. This has all been done. We know it works. Hit update. Done. If I remember correctly, this is where we hit the terms and services. No, this is after the document. Nope, I don't want. It should fail technically. And so now we hit bank account. This is another special case. We need to use the stripe.js file, which creates a token on the front end, and then we just reference the token. So I've written all the code already. going to stop doing that. And so this again is another special case. And this goes on the front end, and you say here, else bank account. And as you can see, I have this bank account ID. I'm going to save my new file called bankaccount.js, and it's not called untitled.php. Nope. And bankaccount.js will be handle our submission. So just let me walk you through it. I'm loading a form that has a routing number, account asks the user for a routing number, an account number, and a account holder number. It also asks for an account type, which is whether or not it's a business account or not. It brings in jQuery, it brings in the Stripe.js file, it sets up your public publishable API key, which can also be found on your dashboard, same spot. It also puts in the user's Stripe account ID, so we know who's setting up their bank account ID. And then in the bank account, it submits the form, it handles the default. The Stripe library will create a token for a bank account. These are the default country and currencies. It grabs all the other data. Depending on the response, it will either give them an alert message saying error, or it will send an AJAX request to our setup action.php file, where we take the token and we just save it against the user's account. So with that, we need the backend code as well. And so it doesn't have a value box, so it has to go here. And so if the action type is banking, which we set in right here, it goes into here, grabs the token, checks for the token. If it has the token, grabs the ID from the token and saves it. Pretty simple. The last thing you need to know is Stripe gives you testing codes and stuff, so don't use real banking information for when you're testing. So this is the routing number. So first we have to refresh the page because it won't actually work. And then, so this is the routing number. This is the account number. And then this is the institution or something. Again, add your own labels. Error. Routing number must have 9 digits. I did this right? Oh, this is Australia. There we go. And so you can show the user this error. I personally didn't, because I'm not really handling errors properly, because you should also be handling the errors on the back end. And so I update that too. I hit update. And I got a token. And it reloaded the page. And as it says, you're all set up. So our user's completely set up. How did you create a charge? I have another video on charging users with on Stripe. But when you want to go creating a charge with a Stripe account, Stripe Connect account, all you have to do is on when you go to charge them here, put that Stripe account ID. So the charge is all the same thing. Check my other video, I'll include in the description below. All you have to do though is you have the options here where you include a Stripe account and you put the ID right in there. So this would change to be like the number sign and then Stripe account ID. So that's all you have to do. This has been a video on setting up a Stripe account. I've included this posting. I hopefully explain everything. If you have questions, leave them down below. I didn't show you how to do a charge, but you can. It's not that hard. I have another video on how to do it without the Connect account. And I didn't do a business account, so you might get some different fields and stuff. I haven't gone through all the countries or on all the fields, but you can imagine how that would kind of go. So also check that out. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe. I come out with a new video every single Wednesday. I know this one was a little bit longer, therefore I don't know if I'm going to come out with another video, 2 videos today. But please subscribe, please like this video. Questions, go put them in the comments below.